Hey friends, welcome back. Today's Firearms Friday, and our featured rifle is the M1C Garand, or the M1E7. This is a semi-automatic sniper rifle that began production in 1944 but did not see any use in World War II as they were set out too late. So they were used in the Korean War and even to an extent in Vietnam. They were a Garand rifle, the same 8-round capacity. Everything is the same other than these rifles were standard production receivers, and then they were drilled and tapped and had a base block mounted on the receiver, and then you had this detachable scope mount so you could take the whole unit off, and supposedly it'd hold at 0. You kept it in a case until you needed it and then put it back on. So these were made by Springfield production receivers only, and there was a little controversy. Springfield did not like the task of building these, and though many said for political reasons, I'm not sure, the receivers had to be shipped to Griffin and Howe Company, and then they were drilled and tapped and heat treated through them and sent back to Springfield, which then assembled them into rifles. And this didn't really sit well with Springfield Armory, as it was such a simple task. But anyway, so what they did was they took certain serial number blocks off of the production line and shipped them off 150 miles or so to Griffin and Howe. And these were completely finished receivers, but they hadn't had their heat treating because they needed a soft material, and they would drill the holes in and mount the block on there, and then they would heat treat them as one unit, which later on they found was not a great idea. So they were finding a lot of accuracy problems with this rifle, and they ended up finding out that when they heat treated them together, the base and the receiver had slightly different compositions of metal, so when they heat treated them, they reacted differently, and the bases could warp, and it would throw off accuracy. So they ended up eventually fixing this problem by shipping the blocks to Springfield Armory, and then they were able to do this themselves and heat treat each component separately. And by the time this started happening, each base was serial numbered to each rifle, and these were only in certain blocks. These are a highly faked rifle because in all total there was about 8,000 produced, and later on they would assemble more in the 50s for Korea. But at one point in time, a lot of the rifles were converted back to standard M1 Garands, or U.S. caliber rifle 30 M1, and they took the bases and everything off and filled in the pin and the screw holes, because these excuse me, they required 3 drilled and tapped holes for the screws, and then 2 pins that would locate and hold it in place. So these had to be filled in with weld, and then they'd be shipped out. So the market was kind of flooded with surplus bases and mounts. So a lot of people made faked rifles. This rifle that we have for this example is a legitimate M1C. It's an early one. It was confirmed through the Garand Collectors Association, and I believe Dave McLean at the time. I don't remember where the paperwork went, but the mount is a reproduction. This is a reproduction by Griffin and Howe, and it has some differences from the originals. It's got an alloy base for the mount, and the locks actually don't have the same direction, but at the time it works. This thing doesn't really get shot, and this scope is just a commercial scope that resembles what originally would have been used. So yeah, it's an original rifle with a lot of reproduction attachments. The cheek pad was required because the scope was offset, so this helped get a cheek weld that would line up with the scope. The original scope was the Lyman Alaskan, and it was a 2.5 powered scope. I believe it had a 5-inch eye relief, so you didn't have to get close to it because the receiver still sits out a good near 4 inches, so that helped with the sighting. They were the Lyman Alaskan, but the military designation was the M2? Not positive on that. It's been quite a while. M81 and M82. Sorry, just remembered. So they were good for the time, the 1940s, just a 2.5 power fixed scope, but it also would have had a flash hider, a cone flash hider attached on the end that locked onto the bayonet lug. Accuracy problems that they had with this series also came down to the flash hider. If they weren't installed tight, then it could greatly affect your accuracy. Now, if they were installed correctly and on there tight, they could improve it. So this rifle came about because the standard World War II sniper rifles were all bolt actions, the 1903 rifles. And they thought, well, all the other infantry and everyone are using these semi-automatic rifles. Why shouldn't the snipers? So they set about designing this, which I said started in 1944. But they had so many problems with production and accuracy issues that they started shipping them out as the war ended with Japan. So they never did see action in World War II. Or at least if they did, it was very, very limited. And at the very, very end of the war. These were, like I said, a standard rifle with just the base added on the end. The later sniper version of the M1 rifle was the M1E8, which was the M1D, and it added the scope directly in line on a built-on base in the center of the rifle, so it got rid of a lot of these problems, and it was a lot more accurate. But they're a nice little piece of history, and they're a rare little rifle. So anyways, that's about all I have for this one. Not very long, but I've already gone over the standard M1 before. And besides the production, that's about all there is. So I thank you for coming and visiting again. Hope you learned something about this kind of rare little rifle. And I hope to see you in the next one. Like and subscribe if you think it's worth it. Thanks for being here. Be kind, make the world a better place, and I'll see you in the next one.